Welcome to the Ending Jet Lag. I'm here with Dr. Jill McGarry, who is in charge of Sleep Better Doctor. And
Oh,
she's here to talk about her background and what she does and some of her experiences with sleep, the circadian rhythm, travel, and jet lag. So, Jill, tell us a bit about your background first.
well, hi, Steve. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's lovely to be here. And my background, did you say?
Yes,
To
how
just
you
generally,
became involved with
yeah.
sleep.
So I started being interested in sleep 20 years ago when it was really just beginning to become something to be known about and to be working with. I worked in a team for people with learning disabilities. I headed up the allied health professionals, and we had quite a few people with Down syndrome that
Mm,
had sleep apnea. But they were getting no support, they weren't getting the kit, they weren't getting the investigations. We didn't know why. We were realizing actually their very poor sleep was causing some of their challenging behaviors, their miscommunication. Um, so we actually looked into it and we ended up helping Manchester Sleep Service, the oldest sleep service in the UK, to make reasonable adjustments for that client group. So that's where I started. It was a long time
right.
ago. And gosh, going forward a little bit more, I had a heart condition that meant, or a car accident that caused a heart condition to evolve or emerge that
Mm,
meant I had extra pathways that got open every time I had too much adrenaline. Um, and so I had to get really good at sleeping, not drinking coffee, and they wanted me to not get anxious or excited. So I decided that wasn't going to happen. That's all. You can't not have that. So I got really good at sleeping. And then I had kids.
right.
So yeah, life experience way. That's all fun.
Absolutely. And what's some of the simple measures? You said it was simple measures with these patients. What were some of the ones that you took with these patients to assist them sleeping?
So when it was people with Down syndrome, it was helping the clinic make the reasonable adjustments. So it was doing leaflets with images on. It was helping the staff understand how to communicate with the family members or the carers because the person with Down syndrome couldn't understand what they were
Mm,
saying. But often with people with Down syndrome, they process at a slower speed. They were just talking too fast, not giving them time to think. And then when they gave them the kit, if they after they'd assessed them, if they've got that far, they were just left with the kit. Whereas actually, like sometimes people with Down syndrome live in a house with 4 or 5 other people, and they might have a
mm,
team of 20 looking after them. So each one of those 20 staff would have to be able to learn how to use the kit. So it's quite different from just teaching one person. So it it had a big implication. And all those years ago, the kit wasn't as clever as it is today. It wasn't as
mm.
quiet as it is today. So there were other implications that we had to take into account as well. But
Right.
yeah,
So a lot of communication, a lot of education in that space.
mm,
So you started with that. So tell me about your company, Sleep Better Doctor, what you actually do, what you offer to people.
yeah. So I stopped working in the NHS a year and a half ago. And I had been working in Manchester Sleep Services at that point. But I realised there were massive long queues to be seen, as you probably hear in the NHS in England. And so I decided actually we could do a better job by helping companies help their staff. So companies are beginning to realize if they look after their staff's well-being, it helps them as well. It helps with retention, it helps with performance and productivity. But if you add into helping them with their well-being with a sleep element, it's like it being on supercharge. If you
Mm,
have staff that have slept well, or you're supporting if they're not sleeping well, then actually, your productivity and performance, your team skills, your lack of mistakes, they all begin to really excel. So I decided that yeah, I did it slowly. I took a step out of it. I went part-time and I realized this was working really well. And then I realized actually not just running workshops for companies and their staff and their managers, because sometimes it's managers recognizing it in their staff to help them to know where to go, as well as helping the individuals. But then I started to run clinics. So for 2 days of the week, I help people on an individual basis because not only have I got the skills around the sleep apnea that I was talking about, people find it difficult to breathe when they're asleep, but I help people because I'm a clinical psychologist. I have all the therapeutic skills to do cognitive behavior for insomnia. So I've done the training for that. But because I worked in the Manchester Sleep team, I got that additional training around narcolepsy, nightmares, night terrors, restless leg,
Mm.
um, parasomnias of all types. So yeah, I'm an all-rounder, I suppose. So people come to me at my clinic with very specific needs.
Right. So you've got the corporate wellness aspect and you train people in the basics, but there'll be some people who struggle with particular issues that you've just mentioned, and you can actually see them one on one for that
Yes.
really advanced assistance.
Yeah. And you know what we don't realize is a third of people with insomnia have sleep apnea and vice versa. It's called
Mm.
COMISA. So, you know, sometimes people go, I've got the kit, but it's still not working. So they stop using it. But what they didn't realize, they have insomnia as well. And if you cured the insomnia while you were waiting for the kit, quite often, because in England it takes a while to get it. I don't know what it's like for yourselves. But while you're waiting, then by the time you get the kit, you've cured half the problem before you've even started. So yeah, it's quite a fascinating way to combo things.
And performance, as in terms of business, because you're targeting companies, that having that sleep, good sleep, is an absolute pillar for these people and affects their performance
Oh yeah.
extraordinarily.
Yeah, I'm just about to do a talk on Wednesday to a finance company, and we were just talking through the implications of not sending the email to the wrong person, and therefore not
Mm.
affecting confidentiality, that their promotion of their company is better because they look better, they can think better, their communication is better, their absenteeism is lower, because your immune system's working at its best. There are so many add-on
Mm.
effects of um, sleeping well, that it makes a difference even to a company like a finance company. You think, oh, it's not
Absolutely.
logistics, it's not like a lorry driver. It doesn't have to be. Lots
Mm.
of CEOs are getting better. Like I can imagine a lot of people that come with jet lag. It's the top guys and women that need the help sometimes to get it right as much as anybody else.
Yeah, it's the literal high flyers.
Yes.
So absolutely that affects performance. And I think sleep's one of the foundations of health. Let's take it even higher than a finance company. Let's talk about the President of the United States, or presidents, previous
Mm,
presidents as well as the current one. And we were talking about Air Force One earlier. Now
yeah.
let's walk through that because that was quite intriguing.
Yeah, I'm quite fascinated. I'm not a historian, and I'm not great with dates, so I can't quote those kinds of things. But at the beginning, when they first started using aircraft to get the president to other places because the world was becoming more global, and they just used commercial flights to begin with. And then I think it was during Second World War, they realized that wasn't a safe approach, and the military got involved. And I don't think it was called Air Force One to begin with. I think one of them was called the Sacred Cow, and one was called
Oh,
Queenie, some crazy other names. But after the first few aircrafts, they realized that and they were traveling further afield, they would actually
mm.
need to sleep because it's a long journey and it would be better to be asleep. So they changed the 12 seats on the plane, sorry, the 24 seats into 12 beds. And then one of the presidents went to China in one of those planes and
Oh yes,
realized he
this was
hadn't had
Richard
enough
Nixon.
sleep. Yes.
Richard Nixon going to China, which I think he was the first president to go to China, which was
Yes, you're
it was
spot
quite
on.
a breakthrough, yeah. And it's a
Yeah.
very long flight.
And he was not impressed with his first lot of communication with him. So he was like, how can I get better at this? And so he changed it to a different aircraft that could enable him to have a proper bed rather than a seat that collapsed. So yeah, I think, they're our first jet lag clients, aren't they, that
Mm,
realize that actually, lying down is really important, having a comfortable bed, having space to sleep, is really important for the next day.
mm. And absolutely at that high level, being the president of the United States, you want to be at your peak, and sitting on a plane from Washington DC to China is really not appropriate.
Mm.
now when we think about it, of course he'd need a bed, and it would have to be a comfortable bed, and he'd need all the, accoutrements, and he'd need to be looked after.
Ooh, yeah. And just think of it, 24 seats converted to
Mm,
12 beds. They'd have probably been feeling like they were in bunks. I think that's the phrase they used. That
mm,
they were right next to each other, like in a military dorm. So it won't have been, it will have been better than sat up, but it will not have been a proper night's sleep or flight of sleeping
right,
at
yes.
all. Yeah.
Talking about Richard Nixon flying to China, also let's talk about George Bush Sr., who flew to Japan, and I think he vomited at a banquet.
That's right, yeah. So he recognized also that he wasn't sleeping well. So they've
Oh,
all had huge implications, and that will not have gone down well at all, will it? Of all the
no,
countries to do it, they're very into their tradition and being very etiquette driven.
yes,
So it will have been a complete disaster. He'll have had to done a lot of recovery after that. But yeah, he'll
yes.
have had to have done a lot of recovery from his jet lag as well as socially recovering
Mm,
from it. So yeah, the presidents definitely have to make sure they get adequate sleep. I know I'm just reading Obama's book at the moment, and he talks about one of after he'd become president. I don't know where we was doing a tour, but he realized not only his family, but all of his staff were really struggling with jet lag after they'd gone to
wow.
several places. And I think it's, even if you take a break in between it and you're doing a long tour of, I don't know, the Middle East or wherever,
Mm,
and you keep stopping and you think you're recovering because you're there for a few days, but you get on a flight again. It just your body seriously doesn't have time to recover.
no.
I often talk about our bodies being clocks and that, it takes 2 weeks for our bodies to catch up. And some people don't believe me. Some people are like, you can see it in their eyes. They're like, yeah, Jill, it can't be the case.
Mm,
And then I might tell them some science about our eyes and how, we need the natural daylight to get into our eyes, along the optic
yes,
nerve, to get to the SEN, to be the master clock, to set all the other
that's
clocks
right.
off. And they're like, yeah, Jill, there's a load of gumph you're giving me there. That's not my
Yeah.
body. And then I say my favorite story, and that's about the fact that our bowel doesn't have a clock. It just has sorry, our bladder doesn't have a clock. It just has a valve. So we might get up in the night to
Yeah.
go for a wee.
Mm,
And that valve gets weaker as we get older. So we go
yes,
for a wee more often because it's just a
that's
bag
right.
with a valve on it. However,
That's,
our bowel does have a clock and it is connected to that master clock in our brain that's set by the sunshine. And that's why when we go to bed at night, we never go for a poo
no,
because we don't need
you,
to. Our bowel
no,
tells us it's going to stop working for the
yeah,
next 8 hours or so, depending
yeah,
on how your clock is. So yeah,
that's
people then
it.
go, then you can see the actual cogs hitting in their own head, going, "Oh my God, yeah." And once I've told them, you can't unknow those facts, can you, Steve?
Mm,
Most people tell me later if I meet them again, they say, "Do you know what? That night I even noticed." The next
you know,
morning, I'd been up an hour and then I went for a poo. I was like, "Yeah, your
that's
bowel's
it.
just getting online again."
That's it. It's waking up. So yeah, no, you'll get up for number one, but not a number two.
Yeah, definitely. Our bodies are
Oh,
fascinating for that very reason, So we have these
mm,
clever machines that can fly, through time zones, but our
yes.
bodies can't.
No.
And in fact, I was on talking to another colleague, Dean, and he was sharing with me that bees can't do it either. So they flew a beehive through 3 or 4 time zones. I think they needed these bees to pollinate somewhere else and to
Right.
to germinate and all the stuff that bees do. And when they traveled through the time zones, they still were in the old time zone and were
Oh,
getting out of the
yes.
hive in the night instead of in the day until they adjusted. So
I
yeah.
hadn't thought of bees having a circadian rhythm. Of course they do.
Woo, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
So
interesting. So, because it's not that common to fly bees across multiple time zones, I don't think. No, it is more common for horses. We have horse races, so
okay, yeah,
and
that's true,
horses get jet
isn't it?
lag.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I hadn't
and there's
even thought
special jet
about that.
lag devices for horses.
Oh, now that's fascinating, Steve. What are those devices?
Oh, they're like little. There's like human jet lag goggles, but for horses that shine
Ooh.
like bluish green light into their eye and wakes them up.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I'd love to
Yeah,
know more about that. I'm definitely going to look that up.
yeah.
But yeah, we think we're clever, don't we, as humans? We've
Mm,
invented some extremely clever gadgets. But
yes,
our bodies we have not been able to change. They're still ancient. And I love
that's
that,
it.
We just
No,
have to look
well,
after our bodies.
that's it. We were never built to fly across time zones in a hollow metal tube. That's just not part of the evolutionary process.
Mm. But some animals can, like birds can fly because half their brain shuts off while the other half is flying. I think dolphins
Yeah.
do the same as well, but humans aren't. We're not meant to do that. So, yeah, we do
And,
get
and
the effect.
birds when they migrate, they typically fly north south, so they don't get the jet
Yeah,
lag.
yeah,
So
yeah,
so that
yeah. That's clever.
that's yeah. So I hadn't thought about that, but now that you think about that angle,
Mm.
um, talking about your husband at a conference.
He's gonna kill me for sharing this.
Well, we won't show any pictures. We won't have any
No, we're
incriminating
definitely not showing
photos.
any pictures.
No,
I need to
we
to
are sworn to
definitely
silence.
work on that one. But yeah, he works for a global company. He heads up
Mm,
a global team and he was running a conference. And he must have had, I don't know, over 100 people in Barcelona for 3 days. So there was a lot of build up to it. The
mm,
3 days were full on. But he said at the end of it, why don't you come out? It's your birthday and we'll have the weekend together. So I joined him on the Friday. Oh my
right.
God, Steve. The minute I saw him, I was like, you look exhausted. We've been
Yeah.
married 25 years, so I know when Richard looks exhausted and when he doesn't. I was like, this is not going to be a great experience if you just try to carry on. I said, how about you recover for the next half day? I've got some nice audiobooks. I'll sit on the beach. I'll enjoy
Mm,
myself. How about let's just have like a half an hour check-in with each other? You go up to the hotel room and then we'll meet in a few hours after you've caught some Zeds. I'll get the drinks from the cocktail. You just sit on the lounger and I'll be with you in a minute. Went and got the drinks, came back to the sun lounger, and he was asleep already. Hadn't even got to the hotel room. He still had his suit on though. So blisteringly hot Barcelona weather. So I just gently put his legs on another sun lounger. And then put two sun umbrellas to cover him so he wasn't hot and sweaty. And luckily, it was
mm,
near the sea, so there was a nice sea breeze. But I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to shelter him now to make sure none of his staff see him. I don't want to see your boss falling
oh,
asleep on a sun lounger. So yeah, he has fallen asleep in some crazy places because he thinks he can run on adrenaline. He
mm.
really thinks it's possible.
And it takes its toll.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had so many people I interviewed talk about running on adrenaline when they travel.
Mm.
And
Just
I do not ever want to do event management.
but we were made to survive 2 days without too much sleep, but
Mm,
we must catch up on the third day. And if again we
absolutely.
think of our bodies being ancient, that's exactly what will have happened. We'd have been in the cave, we'll have
Mm,
noticed a lion or a tiger nearby, we'll be stoking the fire to keep it away, and we perhaps needed to do that for 2 days. But after the second day, the lions and tigers are like, I ain't waiting any longer. I'm getting
they're
hungry. I'm
gone.
going to get something else. They've gone. So we can do it for 2 days, but yeah, Richard on that occasion thought he could do it for 4 or 5 days, and it's just not possible. But people do
No.
it, don't they? They work from Monday to Friday, really, really
Mm,
hard. Little sleep, pushing the hours, and then think on the Saturday and the Sunday they can crash. I mean, it's the social jet lag, isn't it?
yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And it's terrible. I trained people not to, when I was working 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, I trained people, do not call me Saturday morning. Just don't.
yeah, yeah, leave me alone. Yeah, so I
So
can
we're
catch up.
looking for healthier sleep habits than that now. So tell
Mm.
us a little bit about your services and what you offer.
So I offer a range of services. So it's one-to-one work, usually on Zoom, or in fact, I use lots of WhatsApp people prefer. So
Mm.
they're one-to-one sessions for an hour to begin with, sometimes a little bit longer if they've got a complicated sleep problem. So I'll use the first two sessions to carry out a real thorough assessment because some people they say, I'm just struggling with my sleep, and lots of people just assume it's insomnia without actually asking any in-depth questions. And you can uncover that it's something slightly different. So I work with lots of people that have got autism and learning disability, and they have a very specific type of insomnia, which I'd like
Oh,
it not to be called insomnia in the future. I'd like it to just be known as sleep onset problems, that they
all
don't
right.
have problems staying asleep, they just have problems getting off to sleep. And of
Mm.
course, that is really linked to melatonin and getting enough daylight. And I think we talked before, Steve, about liking the natural way of doing things. So we talk about actually they can't synthesize the daylight into the melatonin to get the circadian rhythm and the superchiasmatic nuclei working. So in England, you can be prescribed melatonin if you've got autism or you're elderly, because
Mm.
the optic nerve for the elderly doesn't work as well either.
Mm.
Um, but lots of people with autism don't like taking medication. So we work out how much extra sunlight that individual needs to be able to go off to sleep. Because for some people, it can take them 4 hours to go to sleep. Can
Mm.
you imagine having to trying to,
That's
but the minute they're asleep, they have no problem staying
yeah,
asleep.
and they're
So
good
we
once
work
they
out.
get to sleep. It's getting there.
Yes. So we use the Lux lamps, we use natural daylight. So it's not uncommon for me to prescribe to people to walk to work, to get a walk after work, to make
Mm.
sure you buy one of those lamps. One of the other most interesting, people go, really, do those lamps work? Why would they work? And then when I tell them about a Norwegian village in the valley, that in winter in Norway, there isn't much sunlight anyway. I think they get
Mm.
4 hours. But because they're in a valley, the sunlight never gets into the valley.
Ooh.
So they're in complete darkness for, I think it's 3 or 4 months of the
Oh,
year.
dear.
One of the people that lived in that village left and became a very, I think it was a top engineer or a specialist in glass or something. And he came back to the village and built massive mirrors so that it shines the light from the sun into the village in the winter months. So they're basked in the sun all of a sudden, and it's improved their health no end. There's a BBC documentary on it that you could watch, but it's fascinating, isn't it? We think we're clever. I
Mm.
think we're getting our heads around that we can no longer eat processed food without it affecting our health. And I think there will become a day when we realize we can't just use processed light and think we can get away with it. These LED lights are great for us
Mm.
working, to be able to see each other, but they're not good for our bodies. They're
No,
not doing what it needs to. Yeah.
no, and there's too much of the blue component in the modern LED lights that's
Yeah.
really causing problems. I was going to ask actually, is winter in the UK a particular problem for people with delayed onset of sleep because you don't get much sunlight? I've been to Denmark in the middle of winter, which is similar to Scotland, and there's not much. There's a little bit of sun, but not much.
Yeah. So Scotland does get it worse than England. And I suppose the further south in England you go, the better it is.
Yes.
We do have high figures for seasonal affective disorder. So those people that get depressed because it's winter. Um, And yeah, prescribing. So for prescribing people to get daylight, it's not
Mm.
always as effective when it's cloudy and rainy as it is when it's a beautiful sunny day. But do you know what? We complain in the UK about cloudy days, but since I've been doing this work, I can't tell you how many gorgeous days, we've had loads of lovely days. I think one of the cleverest thing is our phones can help us today to work out how much daylight we're getting. So I don't know if you've ever used it, but maybe if I can show on my phone, that top box there that's a light bulb with a
Oh
yellow, the word
yes,
lux in it. If you
light meter.
download that, it tells you how much lux is in the room that you're in or outside. So in here at the moment in my office, it's 140, and it's pretty cloudy over here in England at the moment. And it will probably be about, I don't know, 1,200. outside, but if it was a sunny
Mm,
day, it could be high as 3,000. So it's half the amount. So, but it's good for our clients to know that sometimes still just getting outside, even on a cloudy day and a rainy day, is better than sitting in a brightly lit office. Um, so I often prescribe a coffee in the morning for those that are feeling like sleep inertia, and having that coffee outside, sitting on your garden bench or on your in your porch or wherever is so much better than sitting at your breakfast bar.
getting that little bit of sunlight to wake you up. It's a
Yeah,
natural, no side effects. It's wonderful.
and
Yeah, I
free.
think in Australia you can buy melatonin over the counter if you are, I think, 55 or 60 years old. It's for the older. I
Yeah.
haven't seen it yet. It is available for prescription otherwise.
Mm.
But of
So
course,
yeah,
if you go to the United States or Canada, it's sold in like health food stores in bulk.
and in gummy bears, crazy things like that, that really aren't good for
Oh,
you. But also,
really?
the research is showing us melatonin should only ever go to as high as 4 milligrams. Whereas
Oh,
actually, if you look at lots of Amazon and other pharmacists online, they're usually sold in 10 milligrams, and
hmm.
actually it starts to have the wrong effect if it's too
Oh,
high an amount. So yeah, it's body relative. So for younger children, you wouldn't ever give them 4 milligrams, but at
no.
its max, it should be 4 milligrams, is what the research is showing. Um,
Right.
yeah, in the UK, you can get melatonin on prescription if you have autism. To begin with, it was only for children. So it was only from the ages of, I think it was 6 to 16. And then they looked at the research again and widened it. So now you can get it from 6 months, some crazy early number, to 19. But does the autistic brain change at 19? No. So we've got a little bit more campaigning to do
Hmm.
to how and research to prove that it's good for them at any age.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds wonderful. So you work one on one with individuals. You
Mm.
also work with companies in the corporate wellness space.
Yeah. So I run a variety of different things. So I've just done a LinkedIn post called Pub to Podium. So I quite often do talks in pubs, because I'm really into helping the everyday person improve
Hmm.
their health. So in some of the northern pubs, we've got a thing called Bar. So it's science in a bar. So I
Oh,
just go along to a science to and do a science talk around sleep. And then the podium was talking to a college and all their staff. So it was a massive college in the northwest. And I taught 200 of their staff around sleep for a few hours. So I can go from that end to that end, and then I can do lots of things in between. So some companies have money to run well-being days or team days. So I will run a well-being team event day. So we'll have lots of activities so they can begin to know each other and trust each other along the way as well as learning about their sleep and their colleagues' sleep. Um, and then other times I can run a morning for the whole of the company to do some basic awareness around sleep. And then mid after lunch, I'll spend until mid-afternoon. I'll run clinics for those that are really struggling to be seen. And then after that, I will run the later part of the afternoon to run a session for managers, because it's really important that managers help their staff, because quite often staff try and hide it or don't even recognize it. But managers sometimes spot it before they do, because people begin to make mistakes. They're yawning, they can see their eyelids going in meetings, or other times when they're working and trying to concentrate on something. And having that honest conversation about your sleep is what managers are telling me is it's a real eye opener. That's an interesting thing to say. In the fact that it sits really nicely between physical health and mental health. And people don't mind talking about the sleep. Oh my God, everybody wants to know about their sleep, don't they? I can
hmm.
be in a restaurant with friends and somebody will overhear me talking about sleep. And all of a sudden, they're at the table telling me about their sleep stuff. So people
Wow.
do not mind talking about their sleep, all the problems they've got with it. And I think if you're good at sleep, you can't advise somebody what to do. So having somebody that knows how to support you in the right way to get the right results
Hmm.
can make a difference. So it might be that you can then talk, the manager can then talk about their physical health and how sleep is affecting them, or how their physical health is affecting their sleep. Or it might mean that they then start talking about their mental health. So it's a real nice segue in the middle, that's beautiful for helping teams get better, as well as the individuals. And at the moment, I'm doing some research with a colleague with Chester University, because we're realizing that parents, mums going back to work after being on maternity leave, have huge fatigue. Their sleep deprivation is massive
Mm.
due to bringing up one or several children, and helping them to get the best out of their working day and to get back and to be the best mum they can be would be great. But we're also beginning to realize that men need to do it as well. We've got, most people have two parents or they have grandparents, and how can we help them lean on their village, their community,
Yes.
to be able to get their sleep? So yeah, we're really hoping it's going to come up with some really great strategies that people are using, but give us some figures on how chronic it is, because that, just women are pushing through it. Like, that idea of running on adrenaline, it's women
Mm.
saying, I've got to give to everybody else and not to
Yeah.
myself. So,
And that just doesn't work. You just have to have sleep. You can't. It's like when you fly and they say, put your mask on. If you're traveling with small children, put your mask on first, then the children.
mm, yeah, yeah. Well, none of us are good parents, are we, if we haven't had enough sleep? Our levels of irritation, anger, or inability to listen,
Poor
as well as,
judgment. Yeah.
yeah, risk taking, yeah, yeah, wrong amounts of powder in the milk, whatever it'd be, wrong things on the shopping list, wrong time to pick them up, forgetting to pick them up, all sorts of things could happen.
Yes.
But I think in the UK, I don't know what it's like in other places. The mums are the ones that are given the maternity leave. Some men take it, but not very often. And so when they go back to work, the kids, the babies, are used to the mums being with them. They're not used to the
Mm.
dads. So the mums actually do take on the bigger bulk just because of that effect of them taking longer on the maternity leave. So we're hoping the stats will come through when we get some data around men that have taken the paternity leave. What happens for
Yes.
them? Does it happen the opposite way around, that they have as much sleep deprivation? And how do they manage that as a family? I think we're going to get some really good pieces of
Mm.
help, because it is a social jet lag, or
It
a parent
is.
jet lag. Perhaps we need to label it parent jet lag.
Because, newborn infants don't have their clocks working
No,
yet. And
no.
that's why they're crying out in the night. Their clocks are not yet working. It takes a little
Yeah.
while for the clocks to kick in.
And of course, they've spent inside in the darkness for 8 months. So, why would we think on day one it would kick in? It's going to take. And it goes a little bit skewy again at the age of 2. So parents are like, oh, I've sorted it. And then they go, no, we have to start again.
Well,
Yeah, so
that's
I'll do both. So I can do adults, I can do children. Because I am a clinical psychologist, I've been trained to have a toolkit that's massive. Plus, we're trained to look at the evidence. So we're always trying to get at the front of the knowledge to be able to provide the best practice. So I take part in national seminars and international seminars on a weekly basis, because I want to be offering people the most up-to-date information and solutions possible. Yeah.
okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. Much appreciated. We've had our little technical glitches, but that just happens.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
that's
And
all
we'll
right.
put your contact details in the screen below. And thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you very much, Steve. Really, really enjoyed it. Thanks.